Welcome to the Friends of the Earth Malta podcast, where we discuss sustainability topics of importance to the Maltese Islands and beyond. Friends of the Earth Malta began in 1985 and is part of an international network of organizations, all working to reduce pollution, protect nature, reduce waste, promote local agriculture, and address climate change around the world. We bring you expert guests to help you make sense of what's happening and what you can do. We are here today with Paul Farrugia. He's a sustainability advocate, entrepreneur, and the founder of ReRoot Malta, a purpose-driven business on a mission to make sustainable living more accessible, stylish, and fun. But his journey didn't begin in the world of eco-hampers and refill stations. Paul originally trained as a biochemical engineer and spent several years managing large-scale pharmaceutical and biotech projects across Europe. With a strong background in science and operations, he climbed the corporate ladder until he realized his true calling was rooted in something far more personal and urgent, the climate crisis. Swapping boardrooms for retail, Paul took a bold leap and rerouted his life back to Malta, where he launched ReRoot, a one-stop shop for plastic-free, planet-friendly goods. From locally curated gift hampers to natural beauty, homeware, and refillable cleaning essentials, ReRoot champions a practical and modern approach to low-waste living. Outside of his work, Paul is an endlessly curious soul who will talk your ear off about regenerative agriculture, food system, or his latest travel adventures. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you very much for having me.
So happy to be here with you doing this podcast. So, we heard a little bit already, but tell us again, what is ReRoot all about and how did you come to start it?
So ReRoot essentially is a bit of a love child between the ideas of both myself and my sister, who is the co-founder as well at ReRoot. We've always been quite, I would say, I wouldn't say just advocates, but very passionate about the environment, passionate about the climate crisis. And at that time, in 2018, 2019, there was a nice, let's say, momentum being built around the whole single-use plastic issue, right? Especially around corporations, around the environmental crisis that single-use plastic was causing. And I think at the same time where I was living, at the time I was living in Switzerland, we actually just had our first zero waste store open in the heart of Basel, the city where I was living. And I used to visit it many, many times and buy my own products from there. And it became more from a habit than to a lifestyle. And I began saying to myself, okay, there's something I would really like to implement myself. It would be this, but the only place I could imagine doing that would be somewhere like Malta, somewhere where I can really see a difference, not only that I'm implementing myself, but also something that, is being implemented for my own culture, for my own people, for my own country. So yes, in the end, we just started, we sort of ReRooted 2019. Since then, it's really changed quite a lot. From retail, we expanded then into distribution, we worked into services, and we also focused on it become like social vacation aspects as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is great. So why do you think the issue of waste is something that needs more attention in the first place?
I think the problem lies, for me, at least having in the retail space and now having like 5 years, let's say, knowledge or understanding of how the sustainability business works, as well as from a commercial aspect, what people tend to end up by really going for and really shopping. This kind of like materialistic, capitalistic kind of like mentality has generated way too much waste, right? We see this in the form of food waste. We see this in the form of fast fashion. We see this in the form of offcuts coming from industry like the leather industry or even for the fashion industry. And what I see is the pity in a sense that corporations miss that kind of opportunity of utilizing waste to their own benefit, right? So I see the point from a business perspective, right? We're still living in a culture where at the end of the day, we still need to make a living, we still need to make money, and businesses are also in that kind of aspect try to do so. And I'm kind of, let's say, I feel that through ReRoot over the past 5 years, I've changed my mindset in terms of working against the large corporations and being way to push forward and to try and kind of like bring that kind of capitalistic mindset down. It's more about working with them to try and help them understand that there's an underutilized resource over here that they can really tap into that can end up by further helping to support reducing, tapping into already very reducing resources, natural resources, right? But utilizing already available waste resources like food waste to kind of like create new products that they can further market themselves at the same time, further benefit society from a food waste perspective or material waste perspective as well as the environment. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I definitely want to speak to you more about food waste. But I was wondering in general, like, how are people responding to the store's concept? Like, are people in Malta enthusiastic about the idea of zero waste? Like, are they getting it and why it's important? Or are we not quite there yet, Europe?
Oh, I think it's a funny kind of like, how can I say, look, we've been doing it for 5 years. For sure, what we always tend to end up by saying in the Maltese kind of like culture as well as market, we're always like 5 years behind the rest of Europe in a sense, where it's it's a concept that I think people are aware about, and it's only been growing, right? Every single year we end up by seeing more and more people being captivated by the idea of trying to kind of reduce their overall waste concept, or let's say their overall consumption, and going for more, let's say good quality, long-lasting products which can be reusable and repurposable. Now, what we've tended to see in terms of, obviously, at the beginning when we first opened, it was more extra shopping versus more these kind of like community. And now that's really kind of like shifted. I think what's caused the shift, in my opinion, the past 2 years is the kind of the wellness industry. I think people are super, super aware nowadays of what they're putting on their body, what they're putting into their household, and what they're consuming. And for that, because of those factors, because there's a wide scale level of education going out there on social media, TikTok accounts, podcasts, etc., that because people are so aware now and they have that availability and that possibility of making those conscious decisions and being able to educate themselves to be able to actually purchase better and consume better, they indirectly end up by purchasing products which are more natural, more organic, and more reusable. So the wellness industry and this idea of like me consuming better for myself because I want to have more longevity, live a healthier, better lifestyle, and also for my family, for my friends, for my kids, is also having a better knock-on effect, essentially, for the environment and kind of cause in terms of shopping better for the environment and sustainability. So we're seeing a kind of like a nice shift moving in that direction slowly.
That's nice. That's great to hear. So what are some of your favorite examples of companies that are making the effort to reduce waste? Though you have so many, right? So are you sitting here in your store surrounded by amazing examples?
I would say, if we're talking about food waste specifically, my favorite brand that I love talking about is Upcircle. It's a skincare brand based in the UK, and I think we've been stocking Upcircle now for nearly the full time since we've actually opened ReRoot. And basically Upcircle, what they do is they manufacture everything in the UK, they source everything in the UK, but more importantly, what they try to do is they incorporate food waste ingredients back into the formulations of their skincare products. So, for example, they started off as a brand. They're also coincidentally a brother and sister brand. So they were like similar to us, brother and sister coming together to form another company. And they started off by manufacturing facial scrubs and all these scrubs using coffee scrub, using basically end of days coffee, right? So they started off with their own coffee ways that they were generating from their friends, their family. Then they expanded to their local coffee shops, local baristas, things like this. And then when the company really grew, they actually created a huge network throughout Birmingham, Bristol, London, Manchester, where they collect all the food waste, let's say the coffee waste coming from end of days from coffee shops, baristas. They send that to their formulators. If I'm not mistaken, they're just outside of London. And they reincorporate everything basically back into their formulations to create facial scrubs. They create facial oils, eye cream, body scrubs. They also use, for example, the the residue left behind by the juicing industry for like mandarin juice, kiwi juice, blueberry juice, that they incorporate the essential oils present in the end of, let's say, the cake that's left behind once you press on the fruits, right, to get the juice out. They incorporate that back into their formulations, purely because of the fact that at the end of the day, Mother Nature is the best scientist you could possibly find, right? Mother Nature creates all the chemicals we basically need for us as humanity to end up by really living. And most of these ingredients, most of these products or these vegetables and fruit contain antioxidants. They contain loads of different kind of ingredients, and which can be incorporated back into formulations in skincare to really give us, better skin, essentially. So more natural, more eco-friendly, again, more sustainable. And then another brand is Ocean Savers. They're a really great cleaning brand, not to do with food waste in this case, but they really help reduce on the whole single-use plastic kind of front. So they're really focused on that in terms of reducing microplastics as well as reducing single-use plastic, so that they're more cleaning products, kind of.
Cleaning products. Yes, I use them for my laundry.
Yes, amazing.
Yes, and I use the eye cream for like.
Amazing. Okay, great. No, they are really good brands, honestly.
Very cool. I love all these products. So going back to food waste, we at Friends of the Earth Malta are working on a project to help reduce food waste called Food Connect. It's based in Cyprus, and we're hoping to bring it to Malta, creating an app where people that have extra food can list it on the app, and those in need can retrieve it. It's like a food sharing app, yeah. And so what are some of the products you sell that help to reduce food waste in specific? I think you mentioned Upcycle Gedi. And there might be one or two others.
Yes, Hanoi, we have products which can help reduce, let's say, the wastage of fruit. So, for example, we have one brand called Food Huggers. And basically what they do is similar to like what you're going to be having with your typical cling film or Tupperware kind of style of things. But like, for example, I'll give you a very, a basic example. They have these silicone molds, which are all BPA free. They're naturally sourced Hanotech silicone. And the idea behind it is that you have different kind of sizes for different kind of vegetables or fruit that you want to be cutting in half. So they can essentially they fit in as a glove, and they vacuum seal the half of like a tomato or an avocado or an orange or an apple. And like that, you end up by reducing the food waste in your fridge or in your home. And another thing that we also stock are beeswax wraps from a local brand, which are really, really great. They're using all natural, obviously, beeswax. And you can just, again, instead of using your typical kind of cling film, you can wrap your food around that. And then hopefully that ends up by preserving the food. And the same as what applies for the other Food Hugger products. We have Tupperware lids or let's say Food Hugger bags that you can store your food inside. You can freeze it, you can microwave it, and it's all obviously safe kind of ingredients in terms of what they utilize in that case. Again, in this concept over here, it's more about trying to kind of reduce the wastage of food at your house in terms of your fridge or what you're basically keeping at home for consumption.
That's great. Yes, very, very important. And we'll probably do a podcast just on that alone.
I can imagine. It's a big subject.
Ways to save food at home. Yes. And in general, are there ways that you think that businesses, restaurants, hotels could do a better job when it comes to reducing their food waste and other waste?
I think in Malta in general, I always find that the big problem that we tend to end up by facing is space, right? Obviously, we're highly urbanized. The restaurants, for example, are in areas which tend to be highly urbanized, and we don't have the right infrastructure sometimes to enable things like this. But if they do have the infrastructure, they do have the space, I think doing food composting, for example, in themselves, maybe in their own facility would be really, really great. That's one option. I think it's also sometimes I've spoken with many colleagues of mine who tend to work either the food industry and the food waste in outdoor, the food industry and the restaurant industry. And what they really tend to end up by telling me about, especially when it comes to hotels, is the level of overstocking which they end up by doing, right? And I think that comes from the point of Meaning you have a certain number of headcount that you basically want to either buy, let's say, accommodating to an extent. So it's about ordering the right amount of food needed for the right amount of people, and therefore not wasting basically in the process because you've either over-ordered just to be sure that you always have the right level of stock. So I think there's a maybe something that needs to be looked into in terms of, let's say, stock control. And I think the only other thing I would mention that's not really to do with food waste, but maybe it's in a sense indirectly does, but it's more about utilizing maybe local food produce. I think the fact at the end of the day is when people tend to end up by shopping and consuming local food produce, you tend to end up by, hopefully, fingers crossed, in many cases, don't come across as many preservatives or as many pesticides or herbicides to try and preserve those food which are being shipped, obviously, from long distances coming into Malta by importation. So I think by maybe incorporating better practices to consume products which are seasonal, and to consume products which are more local, even maybe from a Mediterranean perspective, I think can further help us to further reduce the options of trying to end up by creating more food waste or generating more food waste in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it definitely. I think maybe the government could be doing more to support these efforts too. What do you think about that?
That's a big subject, yes. I think let's put it this way. I think there's always room for improvements, and there's always room for where government and better policies can be implemented to ensure if we can always try to reduce as much waste as possible. And if there is food waste generation on terms of how can we utilize that food waste, let's say, to end up by generating either energy, like what they're going to begin doing now, hopefully, as well, with a new plant that's going to be constructed, as well as generating, for example, fertilizer and whatever, and making sure that they can repurpose it. But in general, yes, I think they need to come up with better concepts and maybe even better education and programs more than anything else, right? I think people just we're living in such a very fast-paced lifestyle that we don't really think beyond our own little bubble sometimes as consumers, which I understand, right? I mean, it's a very, very fast-paced life that we're all living nowadays, and it can be very, very difficult and very challenging for everyone to keep up with everything, right? But I think sometimes we do need to step out of that little bubble to understand our effect and our impact that we have, obviously, on the environment, as well as on our surroundings and our communities, and just basically in our country for this context, right? So I think better education and campaigns surrounding the idea of how you as a consumer or you as a household owner or living in a household can be better at reducing food waste. And they had done this at one point when they were really kind of trying to push the idea of organic waste, and they gave all these bins, and that was super, super great. But I found that the buck kind of stopped there in a sense, because the further education required to understand why it's important and other aspects you can do at home to further good use that waste was a bit missing. And as well, I think in the concept as well of euthanizing organic bags, for example, rather than single-use bags. It's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, where I tend to go around. There was one point, I remember last year, it was January 2024, where I don't know why, but it was something that was really peeving me off in a sense, because I was just going around the streets, and all you would see in certain localities is people would throw out their organic waste, obviously on time, on particular days, but they would wrap that up into a single-use plastic bag. And it caused a lot of problems as well, because I got into contact, obviously, with WasteServe to understand what the issue is there. And essentially what they do is they just would throw that, obviously, to the bioreactor. The single-use plastic would flow to the top. They collect that, and then that gets essentially dumped into the general waste, where obviously it will lie there and break down over 400, 500 years. And release, obviously, microplastic and other toxins. So I think that is something where we could also use a lot of education around the whole concept of food waste as well.
I thought those little mags were biodegradable.
They are. So you can purchase them from supermarkets, or you had even get them from the local council as well. But unfortunately, some people just think that they could use any kind of single-use plastic bag like you would get from the process, for example, or someone like when you go to the greengrocer, they package in a single-use plastic bag. So they want, in a sense, they're thinking they want to repurpose it and they want to give it a second life in inverted commas. But in actual fact, what they're doing is being unfortunately more harmful. That goes into the bioreactor and it's about getting stuck there. They have to remove it and then throw it into the generator waste. So that's a bit of a catch-22 kind of moment, I guess. I think
So yes, I remember I actually had purchased some notebooks here that were made from, I think, avocados.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. We used to have those in stock. It's true. We're hoping to get those back in stock, I think, around like September, October. But yes, they actually were. So the whole brand is like exactly rightfully said, is all about repurposing food waste as well as general waste. So for example, yes, there were some notebooks which were manufactured from kiwi husks, which obviously is generated from, the food industry where they chop up kiwis and they retain the husks, they process them and they create it into paper. And there was another one which was another notebook which was made from coffee, so from the coffee husks as well. And they would actually manufacture paper. And then their main notebooks were made from offcuts from leather, coming from the Italian leather industry. So obviously it's a big industry, right? So they manufacture a lot of leather coats, leather bags, things like that. And a lot of offcuts which are generated in the process. So they would actually collect that leather and create notebooks. And then we have another brand called Hundreds and Thousands, which actually generates where they actually basically manufacture, I would say, or sell bags of dried flowers, dried petals, more accurate, dried petals that you can then use for confetti. And they collect all these dried petals from industries which are obviously working with flowers, such as like florists. And they do kind of like the waste flowers in a sense, which they dry up, they process, and then they package. And then people can repurpose them, obviously, as confetti or for decorations and things like this. So it's there's a whole, thankfully, there's a really growing movement, I think. And it's giving, I think, the overall kind of like the enthusiasm we're seeing around either young people or innovators and entrepreneurs is really incorporating, I feel, sustainability into their businesses, whether even it's something as simple as jewelry, but all the way as something as more complex as AI or data analysis. People are really beginning to incorporate the idea of sustainability into the core center of their businesses. So that's obviously great when we see these kind of things.
Yes, I hope so. I remember when I used to live in New York, there was a company that was making bread out of the yeasts that were used for the beer industry.
Amazing.
The hops. Or
wow,
yes.
okay. That's really cool.
So that was very cool. Bread made out of, the beer waste.
That's amazing.
Yes, and it was for young people. It's very entrepreneurial. So I loved it,
We have another brand you just mentioned because you remember now all of them are coming back to me. We have another brand which we just started working with. We only got a bit of stock just to try it out, obviously, and whatever. But they're basically cleaning. It's a cleaning brand. It's like a bar or soap, a circular soap, which comes in a clay pot. And the idea behind it is you can use it as your dish soap. So then you basically get a brush and you rub it onto the soap and it lathers and you wash your dishes with. And the soap is generated from repurposed cooking oil coming from all the restaurants in Amsterdam. So what she does is she's a Brazilian, really beautiful. I think the company is called Boa Vista. They're based in Amsterdam. I think she has a culinary, let's say, background, and she actually goes around multiple different restaurants in Amsterdam, collects their used cooking oil, essentially, which technically would go down the drain, or is processed in a very particular way. I'm sure in Amsterdam, if I can move into, unfortunately. And she collects it, she passes it through a chemical process, and she generates soap, which is like super amazing. And that's something that would be something that would be so amazing for people to do over here in Malta, because I'm sure you could incorporate, like, there's a lot of restaurants up like tourism obviously over here and hotels, and I'm sure if the right structure was put into place, that would be an amazing business to start as well. So ideas for anyone who's listening, maybe to go out there and start businesses as we're creating homemade dish soap. That would be fantastic.
And one last question. I see over here you have some jams and things.
Yeah.
maybe that's something you want to mention.
Yeah, that we can actually. So we do stock, obviously, as in we're a small store. It's we do open obviously during the week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And since we're still kind of incorporating the whole kind of like B2C function, we try to give a space for local producers as well, especially when it comes to the food aspects. So the food actually, and you guys explain how you're always mentioning all the stuff and always coming back to me about food waste. I'm like, we do have this. We have this. We have this. So the food waste in the case of food, which is what we said over here, is we have one brand called Ripe. She's a locally based brand, and what she does is she works with the grocers around Malta, like fruit and veg grocers or farmers, who essentially like what we had discussed before. They have their end of day products, which they obviously would not have sown, which technically would potentially go to waste. But she collects them, she ferments them, and then she creates in chutneys and jams. So she's very, very seasonal, right? So like obviously she has the pumpkins, which are obviously in abundance in Malta, and that's super seasonal. The cauliflower, which she makes a piccadilly out of. Zucchinis, or in Maltese we say arabali, which are also in huge abundance, and aubergines. So it's like a seasonal kind of like product, right? So she collects all these products and she makes all these amazing chutneys and jams. They're super, super great. We love them, and we're always stocking them here in the store. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love it. Well, we probably have to wrap up, but I just want to mention I'm sitting here with all these amazing products. You have to come check it out. There's, reusable water containers and water filters is another thing. So many things. I couldn't even begin to mention them all. So we definitely want to give people your website.
Yes, so it's www.rerootmalta.com.
ReRootMalta.com.
Yeah. And you can also check us out on Instagram as well with ReRoot Malta. So we're quite active on social media as well. So you can check us out there.
Cool. Yes. So thank you so much, John Paul Farrugia, for being with us today. He's the owner of ReRoot here in Malta, located in Balsan.
Thank you very much, Beth. By happy bees, Beth.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Friends of the Earth Malta podcast, where we discuss sustainability topics of importance to the Maltese Islands and beyond. Many thanks to our guests for sharing their expertise, and to the team here at Friends of the Earth Malta, who helped to make it happen. Also, thank you to Burn, the musicians who provided our podcast music, who use music to talk about issues including the climate emergency and social justice while instilling hope for the future. See their solar-powered website at burnofficial.com. You can learn more about Friends of the Earth Malta's work on our website, fomalta.org, and by following us on our Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn pages. And please be sure to sign up for our monthly newsletter, where you can keep up with all of our ongoing events and activities. We'd love to hear your feedback. See you next time!